and welcome to What the Privacy with a great guest today, Bob Carver, the famous Bob Carver, who's the principal cybersecurity threat intelligence and analytics guy at Verizon. Everyone should know Bob Carver. If you're on LinkedIn and Twitter, I think Bob's got over how many followers? Over 43,000 followers?
Yeah, I think something. Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's got to be
on LinkedIn. Yeah,
that's got to be a full-time job, Bob.
yeah, it is. 5, 6, 7 years ago, LinkedIn announced me as one of the top 5 in the world to follow and on cybersecurity. So,
hence my nickname for you is Bot Bob.
Well, I'm reading the news all the time.
Before we kick off this episode, I'm going to tell you a lovely story about Bob. I was talking to Bob about my father, who's a nuts cyclist like I am. He was in his 80s and 86, I think, and he was racing for the traffic lights to go for the Tor Point ferry, hit a pothole, bust his femur, pelvis, 5 ribs. And I was talking to Bob about this accident about 2 weeks later, and Bob said, "What's your dad's name then?" And he said, "I'll go to church, do a prayer for him with his prayer group." And then I thought, oh, yeah, okay. Being a heathen Englishman, as I am. And then next day, I had a call from my father, and he said, "Hello, Andrew." He said, I said, "Where are you, Dad?" He said, "I'm at home." I said, "I've had a miraculous recovery." And I thought, wow, what did Bob say?
Hey, I guess sometimes it works.
Yeah, I just thought that was just a great story.
Yes, I am so glad that your father recovered well.
Yeah, and he's just 89 the other day, and he's still out cycling.
Good for him. Good for him.
So can I ask you about your job first of all, actually? What does a principal cybersecurity threat intelligence analytics guy do at Verizon?
Oh, wow. Yeah. We work with all the different data feeds. And boy, I haven't counted the latest amount of data feeds, but it's well into the 30s, maybe even to the 40s now. Different data feeds from different, intrusion detection systems, endpoint security, net flow. We also have various threat intelligence feeds. A lot of these go into our SIM, or sometimes now they're calling it SIEM, I guess. Anyway, we analyze all those and try to make sense out of them. And sometimes they're used for threat hunting. Sometimes they're used for correlation. And we're starting to do a little bit of machine learning as we can build computer resources to do that too. So if that makes sense.
I do have to say, one of the best things to come out of Verizon, besides yourself, Bob, is one of the things I really do appreciate is the Verizon annual report, which is coming out on the 1st of May.
DBIR,
yeah. As we say in England, it's the dogs. It's fantastic. And I always appreciate any company that does research on this scale. But Verizon obviously has deep pockets. And I know you do remind me it's the biggest IT company or comms company out there in the world.
It's one of the biggest, yeah, definitely.
Why do you think they got it so right on those reports?
Yeah, they started a long time ago perfecting that. So it is people that volunteer. It's companies that volunteer when they get breaches. Yeah, nobody's forced to do this. And they do it out of the benefit of the general cybersecurity community to understand what has been going on for the past year. And I think it helps.
Definitely helps.
There are micro trends, though, that can happen off and on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, definitely. But then there's trends, when you deal it over the last 12 months, it comes to light things people should be concerned about and be increasing their risk management game to be able to counter these attacks. But as you probably know, I was employee number 1 for Verizon Wireless. And you probably know that you heard of Paris Hilton, right? The famous Paris Hilton of the Hilton family hotels. Paris Hilton got hacked from one of our competitors. I think it was T-Mobile. Then Verizon at that time, in the early days, it was back, when I was hired, it was 2005. They decided, I think we better hire some full-time security guys. They were hiring some contractors part-time to look at some of the events, intrusion detection events. And that's about what they had, is they had firewall, I think, and intrusion detection events back then. So I say I owe my job to Paris Hilton. So, because our account got hacked.
You've just
One of our
you've just got
competitors.
to say that in the right company. If you say it in the wrong company, they'll be
Yeah.
thinking, wow, Don Juan Bob Carver.
No, I have yet to meet her yet. One of these days, maybe I'll get to meet her and thank her for.
Yeah, she'll be thinking, who is this mad guy?
Yeah, exactly.
It's Bob
Exactly.
Bob. It's Bob Bob. I think one of the good things about the Verizon report for me is that when you see general reports from other companies, they are good. But the thing I like about Verizon, and this is not a Verizon appreciation show, by the way, is
Right.
the context they put behind the stats. And I know when they take a snapshot of stats over a year, and it's based on a set of people they've had information back. So it could be 2,000 people or 10,000 companies, whatever. It's always the context and the written word that's behind it. That's the thing I always appreciate. What's going to be interesting, because I know you've been posting a lot about AI and the swindlers using AI and all the artificial intelligence scams in the finance sector. It'll be interesting to see what stats they're going to have or information they're going to have in a report this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to say. I used to get interviewed with by them on a regular basis earlier when I was hired, but then recent times I have not because there's other people that they go to now.
Right.
I did one of the things I can tell you though. When they did interview me, I had one of the largest botnet monitoring networks in North America, if not the world, for any ISP, internet service provider. What we mainly saw, even Verizon Wireless is a wireless network. Of course, I work for Verizon Wide now. Most of the compromises were on PCs, Windows PCs.
Well,
and we didn't see that many. We didn't see that many phones being compromised.
But since then, I mean, the phone's turned into a mini PC anyway, hasn't it? So it's exasperated the touch points. I did see that stats that. I do apologize to Michael. He's got a big surname which I cannot pronounce, and I won't go anywhere near pronouncing it. On your post on LinkedIn about swindlers are now using AI, Michael, who's a cybersecurity instructor guy, said with almost half of the internet traffic, 49.6%, being caused by harmful AI bots, according to Forbes, it's crucial for people to pay attention to this warning. And they are getting cleverer. I did see, the trouble is, someone posted something on Instagram, and I couldn't tell whether it was a true story or not a true story, or whether it's a true story about a Beck email going through to some chap who worked in finance, asking for his CEO to transfer. It was his CEO asking for him to transfer millions. And he wanted to get everyone on a call because he didn't trust the Beck email. Top notch to him. And then all the images they had of all the people on the call were AI generated. And he assumed that call was genuine, and he sent the millions across, which of course then he found out later on he had just been scammed. Now I didn't know if that was true or not, because I don't know, is that an AI generated story that's true?
Yeah.
Or is it just hogwash?
I read the same story. And of course, AI has been manufacturing voices, synthesizing voices of a target for a long time. But I think it came into the news, what was it, about a year ago, where, oh gosh, what's the guy, the famous actor, Tom, what's his name? Tom
Cruise.
Tom Cruise, that they did a fake video on him.
Oh, yeah.
So they synthesized his voice and his face in a video. And that was sort of like the big start. And now, boy, there's dozens of companies that are synthesizing the voice right now, where they just have a sample. Some of these, they can have like 30 seconds or less of a human voice, and they can make a synthetic voice for whatever you want them to say.
Well, don't forget, Mission Impossible was beyond the curve, wasn't it? Because they in Mission Impossibles, they actually were able to synthesize. I can't say it as well.
Yeah,
synthesize. I got that. the voice when they try to impersonate someone in order to gain access to some building.
Right.
Great films.
And now the video is the thing. Having the video and that sort of thing. And of course, somebody made Biden's voice to say, don't go out and vote on the primaries. Remember? You probably heard that. So and that was like to hundreds of thousands of phone calls. And they actually finally tracked the guy down. And the guy, unfortunately, he was from Texas that did that. So he probably was a Trump backer. So anyway, he did that for many thousands of people.
Right. Well, one thing I try and do to avoid talking to Americans is the topic of Biden and Trump. So we'll keep well away from that topic.
Probably best. Yeah.
Going back to bad bots, that Forbes article that chap circulated said bad bots have already taken over Ireland. They account for 71% of the traffic. And in Germany, where they account for 68% of the traffic. I mean, that's just crazy figures, isn't it?
It is. It is. That's one of the reasons, even at home, I do a lot of filtering through DNS and through a layer 7 firewall. So I have threat intelligence and we do that at work too. But for customers, I mean, I block like 500,000 domains every day, and it does reduce the amount of traffic. But also it keeps people from getting compromised.
There's some great work being done by the Global Cyber Alliance, where they've got the Domain Trust Program, where they've bringing all these agencies together, and we're putting our 5 penneth in, where they are getting rid of the bad domains. But the trouble is they're on a hiding to nothing because with AI and everything, they can generate so many, they can't keep up, in my opinion.
And we used to be able to sort of know that it was probably bad if it's something generated within the first 30 days. You know, if they just only stood up the domain 30 days ago, there was a high probability it's bad. But the sophisticated actors are buying domains and holding on to them for 12 to 24 months before they're using them for their nefarious purposes. So even on my home, I alert on domains that are less than 30 days old, but I don't block them because the real serious actors their domains are already a year old or more.
Guess how many domains there are worldwide then, as of January the 31st?
You tell me. You tell me.
664 million domains.
Oh, gosh, yeah. A lot.
So, I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, email addresses. I mean, I appreciate that this has got to come across correctly, but I'm not very good with words. I appreciate a good phishing attack. You know, when someone sends you an email and it's really structured well and the logos are lovely.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But the thing that I even fall for because we must spend about 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, Bob, just analyzing the emails to check if they're correct or wrong. What I do fall for sometimes is the actual spelling of the in the email address, because they can use the Greek version of the letters, can't they? Can just slightly change them.
Sure.
I mean, I delete so many emails. So much goes to junk. Positive about putting things in junk is that we get rid of all the lead generation emails that we receive.
I don't know about you, but I mean, it seems like I have to continually do that over and over again. But it helps block not only for you, but a lot of other people down the road too.
Guessing game, how many email accounts worldwide as of November the 28th?
Oh, you're gonna have to tell me that one too. I don't. you know a lot game. Of these.
It's 7.9 billion.
Whoa.
I mean, 7.9 billion.
Whoa, yeah.
That's shed loads. Absolute shed loads.
Yes.
What is the size of Verizon, though? Because you always remind me how big Verizon are.
Oh, gosh. You know, I think, and I'd have to look at it again, but I think it's close to 150 million for the wireless. So, and that's not the wireline part. And we also have a large part of the internet backbone, because we had it not only before, but we've accumulated numerous vendors that had the internet backbone too. So I don't know. I would just guess easily 20%, maybe even close to 30% of the internet backbone in the U.S. And there's other places too. I'm sure they're starting to do, but which I don't deal as much.
Just imagine the amount of traffic that goes across that infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine the amount of vulnerabilities. Now, I'm having fun here because I've got we use the words I just saw them Google. I just pulled up another stat because I'm always fascinated by the amounts of times you could possibly be scammed. So the average person at work sends 120 emails per day.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
I can't believe that. Can you believe that?
That's pretty
I
high.
can't believe
Yeah.
that. I can't.
Although when I started the group, after a few years, I was getting about 500 work emails a day. And I tell you, people that I talked to that were, in a small business, they just said, "Well, you're just lying. You're lying to me." It's like
Yeah.
you realize, there's like even now, I think there's close to 120,000 employees, but you're dealing with traffic that goes over 50 states. And actually, we have some worldwide presence too. It's not small potatoes. If you talk not only the data that's in the SIM or the SIEM, depending on what side of the fence you're on that, we also have a lot of data in huge data pool of stuff. Between all those data points, it's easily flows over a billion data points a day, over a billion.
That's
So
massive.
how do you make sense out of all that? It's not easy. It's
If they're saying that the AI bots are creating about 40 to 50% of those,
sure.
that's just nuts.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that I've seen since I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago was the number of vulnerabilities that's been reported by Cisco and Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, it's unsustainable with Microsoft, the biggest amount of Microsoft vulnerabilities sorted out. I just think it's so unsustainable.
Yeah.
Because it's putting a lot of onus on Verizon, it's putting a lot of onus on all the other MSPs in order to protect the network. Yet all these companies are saying, hey, we've most probably been infiltrated by China. I think that was Cisco the other day.
Sure.
I don't know how
And
we
then
can improve it. I always like Tom Ryan's comment. Someone should start over again. We need to have a delete button. What do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, especially like in Windows, they always have to, they try to do some backwards compatibility in every build. And a lot of the backwards compatibility are with different applications and code that was not done appropriately, securely in the first place. So you're just sort of adding one vulnerability on top of another on top of another. It's the same thing with the open source code. I know years ago people were saying, "Oh, open source is much more secure because everybody has their eyes on it and that sort of thing." But not everybody has time to review that code and use some of the proper tools to make sure that code is secure. Some people have the ability to just look at the code and tell it whether it's secure or not. But then also there's sophisticated tools out there that will go over the code and see and look for vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that word sophisticated, a word rather overused by people who've just been breached.
Well, think about it too. Think about it. Pretty much all of the browsers, or vast majority of the browsers, anything that's based on Chromium or Mozilla is updated every single week now.
Yeah.
And it's usually, most of the time, it's to get rid of vulnerability. Sometimes it is usability from time to time, but most of the time it's to get rid of vulnerabilities. And how many people do you know now that are actually updating their browsers every single week? Probably, I bet you it's maybe 20% if you're lucky.
Well, don't forget we're not normal people because we live in this industry. So when you talk to normal people on the street, they go, "What?" As I say, we've got to be in the top 1% on from a cybersecurity perspective. So we are more aware of it. I think it always goes back to how do you make the population aware of what you should do, simple tricks. I mean, every day I clean my browser, I get rid of everything, cookies. You won't be, you'll be flabbergasted when you see how much a megabyte takes by staying in your browser. So it's simple things like that.
There was somebody that I met that was former Five Eyes. I mean, pretty much he said, you really should be rebooting your whole computer every day. Doing your cookies, that's good because they recently revealed publicly, and it's been this way for a long time, that at Google, through Google logins, they can grab those cookies and be in your Gmail or whatever Google accounts you have and take it over. So I know Chrome is working on something. I don't think they actually gave a date, but they're going to make it so those cookies can't be stolen anymore. Now, I think there's some, not to get too off topic here, but there's starting to be more and more hardened browsers. They started about a decade ago and they sort of disappeared a while. And now they're making a big comeback of these hardened browsers. Some of these hardened browsers will also make sure that your cookies can't be stolen and used to break into your account. And the thing is, once they're in your account, basically they can go and change your password on you, and you'll be locked out of your account.
Do you know what they should do? You know, when people smoke, when they suddenly realize that smoking was bad for you, and then they put on the cigarette packet a picture of someone's lung after they've been smoking for 20 years. I'm quite surprised the lawyers haven't thought about this, actually. They should say using our service comes with a health warning.
Yes.
So that would mitigate any class action. Well, we told you using our Chrome browser or our Brave browser, it came with a health warning.
Yeah, I don't think they want to have any admission at all, which I don't blame them. Understand?
I mean, they usually tell you to apply, reasonable measures to, security measures, but most people don't have time anyway. I know of a person who used an art service, got to watch out what I say here, who they are, and their browser their DNS had been obviously compromised, and their chat on the front page diverted that person who was querying why they didn't get any commission, and that chat went to a contact center, which was obviously a dodgy contact center, so the DNS was compromised, and nearly lost £1,000. DNS is man in the middle attacks.
And I've seen that. I saw somebody once that their home, we call it router, I think you call it router probably, but the home router got compromised, and they were able to change the DNS to a bad DNS. And I think at that time, this was many years ago, it was over in the Ukraine. It would send people to all sorts of dodgy sites, and quite often they were related to, some big, it was probably, the Googles and the Microsofts and whatever, think about very popular sites in the States. And so, I tried just to do a router reboot, but that wasn't good enough. We had to do a factory reset, and the factory reset was able to clear out the DNS settings, and it was fine. So after that, anyway, scary stuff. But also another story, before the Ukraine-Russia war broke out, the Russians were constantly getting into everybody's routers in the Ukraine. And luckily, most of the time, the malware was in memory, so they could just do a reboot. Anyway, it was just highly recommended at the time for all the Ukrainians to reboot their router every single day to get rid of any the malware that the Russians were throwing in there, and so they could snoop on communications that was going on.
I do know that the hackers were in the Ukraine telecoms.
Sure.
I mean, the Chinese are everywhere, the Russians are everywhere.
Yeah,
so
sure.
We had a guy from, I think it's one of the agencies, MI5 or 6, doing a talk. I think he was basically telling everyone that look out for the supply chain, blah blah blah. It's not as though we don't really know the news. We know that's happened. But he actually, it was like, to him, it was like new news. This is a threat. I mean, come on, we know this.
Yeah, sure.
But maybe, again, it's good that we get the public made aware. It shouldn't be aimed at us. It should be aimed at the public continually. Right. One thing I do like about the US is that there's lots more. I know you're a bigger population, you've got more resources, and you've got more media outlets. When I go onto my RSS feed, I get a lot more stories out of the States, public stories, news stories, than we do in the UK. It's amazing if a story gets out on main media in the UK. So it's, I always like the American stories. And it's a bit sad that it's mainly the health sector that gets impacted, or the feds or whatever. Here I've got the story here from the guy from MI5. It was foreign states targeting the UK universities. Never. Sorry.
Well, hey. Unfortunately, they also have people that are getting paid by them in universities that are allies worldwide.
Well, we've got thresholds on the breachware service. So if you go in and search on some of the universities, if it goes over 100,000 compromised accounts, it just comes up. You've gone beyond the threshold, or it's
automatically.
So when I was doing some stuff for a chap that we both know, and I was looking at universities like Michigan and some of the other big ones, they were like 250,000 email addresses compromised. And the thing is, with university students or education, go back to education again, that data is far more valuable, below health, by the way, because it's got longevity. So people can steal the data, hide behind the data or that person's ID, create accounts for at least 1 or 2 years until that person starts going up the financial services ladder themselves, only to find out when they do actually try and apply for a credit card or with another company, they've got a bad credit record. So universities, lower
Sure.
schools, primary schools are always good targets.
Sure. I suppose you can freeze your credit account over there too in UK, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what do you think about this? When a breach happens, you
hmm
always see we take the security of your data really seriously. Well, thank you very much. I should hope so. And we'll give you a free credit check for 2 years. So
Sure.
what do you think about that? That's like a default
Uh,
thing.
it's almost too little too late now. That was the thing. I mean, I remember it was only 12 months at the beginning when they used to do that. And that was it, and be done with it. And they said, "Oh, just, everything will be fine. Here's your credit check, we'll be watching your back for 12 months, but once you got all that information, information, that PII, I mean, like you say, it's good forever. You can't, it's almost impossible to get a social security number change unless you're
Yeah.
unless you're under a witness protection program or something, which that's not going to happen for too many people. Yeah, it's sort of little. It's just a little too little. It's too little. One thing I want to say that a lot of these hospitals really and healthcare agencies just haven't been put to task enough when they do get these breaches, because I'm sure that most of them know that they're substandard in their methodologies and their risk management. The ones that there have been some hospitals here in the States that have been put to task, and all of a sudden they hire a CISO instead of just trying to have the IT staff that's probably already overworked for just normal IT duties, trying to do security also. Anyway, they get some head of security of a hospital, and they start actually putting money into that. But I haven't seen that done in recent times that much. We'll see. I have a feeling it might start happening here in the near future, but it seems like they've let a lot of them get away. That's the other thing. I've talked to doctors that are on board of directors of hospitals, and they pretty much says, well, why should we waste all that money on security? We're probably gonna get breached anyway, and and we need the money for other stuff anyway. Yeah, well, probably like their bonuses or to buy some fancy medical machine, which I
Yeah.
understand. But it's like taking no responsibility. They don't care as long as it doesn't affect them.
Well, I think
They need to be
that's a
brought to
bit
task.
that's a bit harsh, Bob. I mean, I know the healthcare sector in the States, I think it equates to like 40 to 50% of breaches in the US
hmm
by healthcare companies. And
Right.
I did think the tipping point was when I saw one of the Louisiana hospitals had to close down. I think there was two of
hmm
them because of the breaches and
Yeah.
then the following on class actions.
Right.
But you would think that the attitude is changing. We've signed up a lot more US hospitals. I mean, we're
Good.
only 25 quid a month, so it doesn't really hit their bottom line a lot. We've seen a slow progression, and I think there is a slow progression. I mean, the fraud in the UK, I think, equates to, Mr. Statsman today, equates to 40% of the crime that goes on anyway. And I do see a change. I think it will slowly get better.
I hope so.
But will it get better before the tipping point, which is whatever that is? And what I mean by the
Sure.
tipping point, when do banks and healthcare organizations suddenly realize that they can't afford to pay out all the time, like United Healthcare, and they've got to do something about this? It's got to happen. The governments have got to wake up to it. We've got an explicit rating on this call, so don't worry. All
hmm
this bollocks about from the 40 countries saying that we're trying to get an agreement that within these 40 countries, including ours, UK, Europe, and US,
Right.
and so on, Australia, that we will not pay ransomware. I mean,
Mm.
that's a business decision.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. I agree with that.
Until
I don't think that should be mandated by law or the government. It's just it doesn't make sense. There's some situations that they may have to pay. It's because they do not have the resources to reconstruct what they had in place. On the other hand, quite often, a large portion of these, even when they give them the keys to decrypt everything or to get back their data, a lot of times they do not get back their data even after they pay them, millions of dollars in Bitcoin. There's that side too.
That's an interesting world we live in, isn't it?
It is.
So I'm going to give you a challenge before we finish this call,
Okay.
Bob. I'm going to give you a challenge, and I think the listeners would like this challenge. Can Bob do, and I'll take up the challenge as well. I challenge you to a really positive cybersecurity story next week on any of the media pro. I challenge you.
I am going to have to dig on that quite a bit.
Yeah, we got to have a positive one, whether it's a statistical one, which has no context. I don't care. I think there are some good stories out there, and there's some pretty amazing things that are going on there. There's a lot of shit out there, but I mean, excuse my language. But do you reckon you can do that?
I will do my best. It's gonna take a lot more digging than the normal article.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the call, Bob.
You bet.
It's been great.
My pleasure.
For listeners, I talk to Bob. We liaise most of the time on social media. We're also part of a Clubhouse call on the Friday with Dave Glenn and the team, which kicks off, I think, is it 7 UK time, 8 UK time? What time is it?
It's 3 p.m. Eastern, so it's 9 p.m. your time.
Yeah, so check that out on a Friday.
Cybersecurity Week in Review.
You'll hear Bob and I agree with each other. So
That's right. That's right.
Thanks for your time, Bob.
Been a pleasure.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.